Spoiler warning for Across the Spider-Verse, so if you haven't watched the movie by now, what are you doing? But anyways, now that I've watched this movie 3 times now in like the span of a week, yes, because it's just that good and I'm in love with this movie. But now I want to break down some of my favorite moments from this movie, as well as breaking down the character arcs that were set up, the depth these characters received, and finally some subtle details that add to the writing. Just gonna be pretty much breaking down all the writing in this movie, because it is just truly, it is just an experience, a spectacle, a masterclass in filmmaking, writing. Like, I just love this movie. So without further ado, let me just show y'all why this movie is just truly that. So to start off this video just like the movie, the first character we see is Gwen, and they give us a great adaptation of Gwen's origin from the comics. Gwen is my favorite Spider variant outside of Peter, so to see her finally get some real spotlight as like a main character, or more of a deuteragonist, was just so amazing for me, because I've just wanted to see this for a while now. But we see Gwen riding off her arc from Into the Spider-Verse. In that movie, she was scared to get close to anyone because of what happened to her best friend Peter. But she starts to grow close with Miles, and by the end of the movie, she sees him as a friend. And in this movie, that internal conflict is fleshed out even more, as well as her continuing to take those steps and allowing herself to get close with people again, but she still has the detrimental fear that the people close to her will die again. And the scene with her dad in the beginning of the movie was just so goddamn emotional, him being the only person that she had left in her life, and then we get the gut punch of him saying,
"You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you.
Dad, are you really this afraid of me?
You have the right to an attorney.
No, stop!
Don't get any closer."
after you see her in pain trying to get her dad to understand her and be there for her.
Can you just not be a cop for a second and be my dad here and listen to me?
This is just so heartbreaking. And the more this movie progresses, things just continue to get deeper and darker. She desperately wants to see Miles in the beginning because of the bond that they grew in Into the Spider-Verse. I think she sees Miles in the same way that she saw Peter, as well as feeling like her and Miles are the same. And we get this great conversation between her and Miles. And then later in the movie, when Miles saves Inspector Singh, Gwen tries to stop him because of the cannon event. And later Miles remarks, "I thought you were trying to protect me." But Gwen wasn't lying here when she said that she was trying to do both. She was also trying to protect Miles because, again, she has that immense fear of not being able to handle losing another friend, which she cares deeply for. But at the same time, she doesn't want an entire world to possibly be destroyed. And then towards the end, we get this beautiful moment.
This mask is my badge. And I'm trying to be good too. I was trying so hard to wear this thing the way you would want. And I didn't. I can do all of these things, but I can't help the people I love the most. And they can only know half of who I am. So I'm completely on my own.
This moment just hits so goddamn hard because you can just hear the pain in her voice. Haley Steinfeld does an amazing job. And it's not only because she's worried about losing Miles at this moment because she knows that Miles feels like she betrayed him, but due to her fear of losing Miles in the first place, she didn't know how to tell him all these things, which just only digs her hole even deeper. But she's also worried that her dad is going to die. But it's her finally coming forward with her dad, as well as her dad who is feeling hopeless that he lost his daughter because of the mistake he made in the beginning of the movie, and Gwen saying,
"I was trying so hard to wear this thing the way you would want. And I didn't.
Gwen feels like that mistake not only caused her to lose her best friend, but she also feels like that made her lose her relationship with her dad. And the parallel between Gwen's mistake and her dad's mistake, and them just opening up to each other, just comes together so goddamn beautifully for the relationship to finally be good again. Like, oh my fucking god, this movie is so goddamn good. And then we get the final scene of Gwen saying, "I never found the right band to join, so I started my own with a few old friends," which is her character arc coming to a near end because she is finally allowing herself to care for people again by referring to her band as friends. And this time she's actively seeking them out because she's starting to let go of the fear of getting close to people and losing them. And it was Miles again that impacted Gwen's arc, just like Into the Spider-Verse, because when Gwen says to Miles' parents,
One thing I learned from Miles, it's all possible.
Gwen's dad not becoming captain, meaning he won't die, and the stuff that's been going on with Miles throughout the whole movie, all of this stuff just impacts Gwen's arc. This is just, I love it. And as someone who is a massive fan of this character, if you love the writing for Gwen in this movie, I promise you, it literally only gets better in her comics, so just read them. And now it's time to talk about Miles. From the beginning of the movie, we see Miles as well riding off his arc from Into the Spider-Verse. As soon as we see him, he's now someone who is a lot more confident in himself and his abilities, just like at the end of Into the Spider-Verse, but it's just amplified even more here. We now see Miles struggling with trying to balance a normal life with school and the pressure from his parents, while also trying to be Spider-Man, and that stress is just eating away at him. We also see him struggling with the fact that he feels like he's alone, in the sense that he has no one else to talk about being Spider-Man and all the things that come with that. Miles as well in this movie feels like he can't do what he wants to do, and that's one of the major elements of this movie. He feels like his life is just boxed in, and when the biggest moment in this movie happens, he feels this once again, but he also feels like he's being betrayed. And after this little like intervention scene we go through with Miles in the Spider-Verse, there's a couple great moments I have to go over regarding this like topic and element of his character. The first moment is when Gwen tries to save Miles and Miles lets go because again, he feels betrayed. And this is also added onto with the fact that he was already feeling a little betrayed because of what Miguel told Miles about the cannon event and how Gwen tried to stop him, which I already went over in Gwen's section of the video. The second moment is you can see Miles trying to pry open this floor gate in preparation because he was already feeling betrayed, and this is why he doesn't really act surprised when Peter B's watch goes off, despite Peter B not even actually wanting this to happen. But of course the other reason he stays with Peter is because he has a feeling that this would happen and plan to lure all these spider people away from HQ so he can go home. And the third moment is also in the same scene, but it's when Miles said to Peter B,
"Then why didn't you come see me? I wanted to be with you guys so badly, but this thing isn't what I thought it was."
This is just such an amazing and powerful moment and such an amazing scene, showing off not only Miles' internal conflict, but also his feeling of betrayal. Not only did they progress the plot forward in an efficient and interesting way, but they also continue to give us amazing character moments throughout, and like that's what a lot of the moments in this movie are like. And the fourth moment is when Miles is just swinging home in a rush of emotion, just consuming him, hearing Miguel's words telling him,
You're a mistake! If you hadn't been bit, Peter Parker would have lived! And none of this would have happened!
and then we see all the characters from the first movie's faces where they say,
The hardest thing about this job is you can't always save everybody.
I'll make you pay for everything you do.
You have a choice between saving one person and saving an entire world.
I can do both. Spider-Man always.
Not always.
Miles is not only feeling the rush of emotions that he might be the reason that his father could die, but also that he's responsible for so many things happening. And again, this scene just compounds on his conflict, that he feels like he can't live his life on his own terms at all, and that everyone is trying to.
Everyone keeps telling me how my story is supposed to go. Nah, I'm gonna do my own thing.
And then the fifth and final moment is in the final scene when he spouts out all of his emotion to his mom after finally reaching one of his comfort places, which at the time he believed to be his room. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about in regards to Miles's like comfort place, Miles's arc in the first movie was about him being too scared and worried to leave his comfort zone, which caused Miles to neglect responsibility. And then obviously we know how that story concludes for the first movie. But if you want a more detailed breakdown on the writing of Into the Spider-Verse, I'd highly recommend watching this video from Story Street, which he does a great job at breaking it all down. But anyways, once Miles reaches his comfort place and he sees his mom, we get yet another phenomenal scene of Miles venting all of his feelings and emotions finally to his mom, all for him to realize he's in the wrong dimension. And of course, we all know the rest and how this plays out. And I legitimately cannot wait to see where all this writing goes. Like, oh my god, I need the second movie right now. But another part of Miles, just like Gwen, is his dad and his parents, which is another thing that makes Gwen feel so close with Miles. It's because both of their parents don't really have an understanding of what it's like to be in their life, as well as the fact that they both feel alone. But back to the topic of Miles's parents, specifically Jefferson Davis. Miles's dad falling in the beginning is a nice little neat callback to the beginning of the first movie where Peter saves Miles. In that scene, Miles is someone who is out of his depth. And this is actually something that parallels great to Jefferson Davis and his internal conflict in this movie. He feels like he's out of his depth when it comes to parenting Miles. And we see that in the conversation that Miles has with his dad after he's done fighting Spot. Something we also see in this conversation is Jeff saying he doesn't want to lose Miles, but as we all know later in the movie, Jeff actually becomes the parallel opposite of that for Miles. And later down the line, Miles starts to feel what it's like for his dad in not wanting to lose Miles, the way that Miles feels about not wanting to lose his dad now. And of course we have to talk about the person who causes all of this in the first place.
Where do you think you're going? He took a bagel!
All right, time to swing, just like I thought.
I'm gonna take everything from you, like you took everything from me.
Spot in this movie is absolutely incredible, quite easily the best adaptation of him. In the beginning of the movie, he starts off as this jokey character that nobody, even Miles, won't take seriously, but to Spot, his situation is very serious. He's actually a very sympathetic character. He was doing his job as a scientist, just doing what he loves, and his creation completely backfires on him, as he says he created Miles and Miles created him. But while Spot lost everything in his life, he feels like Miles is thriving off of what turned Spot's life on its head and made him lose everything. And the fact that Miles doesn't even care doesn't seem like much to the audience because we're just going along with it and laughing at Spot. And that's one of the reasons why Spot is so mad, is because no one's taking his trauma seriously, which is why I think the tonal shift in this movie from like the first half of it to the second half of it is just phenomenal, because we're being put in the same situation as Miles and the rest of the Spider people who aren't taking Spot seriously. Because the more this movie progresses, we see Spot start to turn into someone who everyone starts to progressively take more and more seriously throughout the movie. And he becomes the character who raises the stakes and tension for this movie, as well as part 2 for this movie. And now that leads me into the somewhat second antagonist for this movie. I don't think Miguel in this movie is actually a bad person. He just fears his history repeating itself. He has a very sad backstory. He loses his whole family, and in an attempt to get back what he lost, he wound up being the cause for an entire universe to be destroyed. And he was responsible for losing another family. And that darkness has just been eating away at him, and you can tell. He puts himself under so much pressure and stress because of what happened to him, and it really is just sad to see. But one of the reasons I think that Miguel could possibly be so mad at Miles in this movie is not just because of the stress that Miles has put onto him, but I actually think he's so mad at Miles because when Miguel tried to be happy in another universe, it caused him to lose another family, as well as an entire universe. But when Miles inadvertently changed the canon of his universe, everything was fine for him, and he wound up becoming a great Spider-Man. Which is why when Miles says this,
What are those claws? Dude, are you sure you're even Spider-Man?
Are you? Who do you think you are? Really?
Miguel gets furious, and of course we get this.
You're the original anomaly!
Miguel!
A spider that gave you your powers wasn't from your dimension. It was never supposed to fight you.
Miguel, don't!
There's a world out there with no Spider-Man to protect them because it made you instead. You're not supposed to be Spider-Man.
No! You're lying! I'm Spider-Man!
You're a mistake. If you hadn't been bit, your Peter Parker would have lived. Instead, he died, saving you.
Which is my favorite part of this movie, and again, this is just incredible writing and dialogue. And again, I genuinely cannot wait to see how this plays out and where Miguel's character goes from here. And now I want to talk about Peter B and Hobie, but first let's start off with Peter B. The moment I mentioned earlier between Miles and Peter B was just amazing. When he told Miles that he had his daughter because of him, that shit just hits so goddamn hard. And another thing about Peter B is he does have a couple comic relief moments, but I think it's great because this is the Peter B that has been developed, and he's acting like his old self before him and MJ got divorced, and you know, like how he was in Into the Spider-Verse. And I'm not even too mad that Peter B was kind of like sidelined for this movie, because in Into the Spider-Verse, him and Miles were both like the main characters, and Peter B got a lot of his development in that movie, whereas Gwen kind of fills up the, you know, the deuteragonist role in this movie. And I think if they would have done too much with Peter, it definitely may have caused the movie to get a little bit overcrowded, but he still has his great moments, and by the end of the movie, he actually develops as a character when he joins Gwen and Miles' side, and starts to go against, you know, the Spider Society. And that's Miles again making another impact on Peter B. But he was still great for the moments that we got with him, especially that moment that with Miles that I mentioned in the beginning of this section. And Hobie was also great. I saw someone say that Hobie is sort of a big brother figure for Miles in this movie, and I think it's very accurate. I loved his personality, and he's someone who subtly cares for Miles, but doesn't show it that much to him, which is like very reminiscent of like an older brother relationship. We get scenes with him like where he breaks through the barriers to get the Spot, and then he tells Miles to use his palms, which is foreshadowing for what Miles does later to escape Miguel's like cage thing. Then we get scenes like when Hobie says,
But you got a nice setup, huh? Nice parents.
They're fine. I mean, we got in a fight, but they just want what's best for me. So
That's a bloody shame.
why?
Because you're not ready for everybody else.
which foreshadows the Spider-Verse trying to convince Miles that his dad has to die for the greater good. And honestly, this whole scene is just a lot of foreshadowing. Hobie also says,
You're on the boss, you don't need all this.
Then why are you here?
Look out for my drummers, all.
I want to be in a band. I want to see my friends, and I need a watch to do that.
Just don't enlist, you know what war you're fighting.
Foreshadowing, Miles doesn't really even remotely know the reality of what he's trying to get himself into with the Spider-Verse team. Hobie doesn't really like or agree with the Spider-Verse people here, and it's fitting for his character as someone who doesn't like the established order and goes against it. And another thing about Hobie is this film's nice use of a little bit of irony, in the sense that Hobie was the only Spider-Person that Miles wasn't excited to meet. But Hobie was the only one in the movie who was on Miles' side for the entire movie. Both of these characters have such little screen time, but the screen time that they get, they both make a great impact on this film and its writing. And for some like final closing thoughts and some more little details that I love how every character in this movie, no matter how big or small their role is, whether they're like just a super side character or even a cameo, majority of them all serve their role in this movie to perfection. And it's for that reason that as many Spider people there are in this movie, it never really feels overcrowded because everyone fills a role so perfectly and the writing still remains tight despite this being a massive story. And all the voice actors do an amazing job, and that combined with the dialogue and the music and the animation, there are just so many scenes and shit in this movie that is just legitimately perfection. And for a few more details I love, I still can't pronounce his name, I'm sorry, but Spider-Man India says, when referring to saving both his girlfriend and her dad, which he wouldn't have been able to do. And the Inspector Singh moment also shows up and mirrors Miles' dad's death when we first see it happen in like Spot's vision. And Spider-Man India winds up joining with Gwen and their team that is going against the Spider Society because of what Miles does for him and the impact that Miles makes on him. Because Spider-Man India also believes that and another detail I love is just like the parenting theme that keeps portraying between Miles and Gwen's dad. They're both parents that feel like they have no idea what they're doing.
Parenting stuff. Big ass mystery.
But at the end of the day, you still feel the love that both Gwen and Miles have for their parents and the love that their parents have for them. The third detail, and I probably should have mentioned this during the Hobie part, but it's when Hobie is stealing parts from like the Spider HQ, which foreshadows Hobie building his own dimensional watch to give to Gwen. The fourth detail is when we see Gwen's like band, and I've kind of been going over this a little bit throughout the video, but these are all characters which Miles has made an impact on that caused them to switch sides and help him. Outside of Hobie because, well, you know, he was like that to begin with. But still, Hobie being there really does fit. And the fifth detail I want to talk about is that when Spot was explaining his origin and how he brought the spider to this universe to bite Miles, we can see that the evil Prowler Miles was actually supposed to get bit in that very moment because we can see him in this frame. And this last part isn't really a detail, it's kind of just like another thing this movie does that's really interesting. And I've seen people actually try to use it as a criticism, which is just stupid. But it's the fact that they set up this moral conflict between the Spider Society and, you know, Gwen's group and Miles's group. This Spider Society has been led to believe that the canon theory that Miguel has is true. So they're not in the wrong for trying to save a whole universe over one person, but I do think there's something that Miguel is hiding. Because Miles's universe didn't break when, you know, the canon event or the non-canon event happened, and neither did evil Miles's universe. So that means that not every universe would break because of a non-canon event. But that's what Miguel has led the entire Spider Society to believe because of what happened to him. But because Miles has made an impact on these people specifically, these people start to raise those questions. It's like the Spider Society is, you know, Spider-Man in like Civil War. He was on Iron Man's side because Tony was withholding information from him, but progressively throughout the comic run, Peter starts to raise questions and then eventually winds up fighting Tony and then leaves. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, we have like PS4 Spider-Man, who had to make the responsible choice in not letting his entire city die just to save Aunt May. It just sets up such a great, just moral conflict that's going to be like, you know, fleshed out more in the next movie. And again, I just cannot wait to see where this goes. Hopefully y'all have enjoyed this video. Hopefully I, you know, shined a little bit of new light to some people who may not have picked up on some of these details. If you guys would like to support me on Patreon, it's only $2 a month. I would really appreciate it and it helps me out a lot. So feel free to do that. And thank you all for watching again. And yeah.
Not done fighting. I don't feel alive.